shall be the policy of this nation to regard any nuclear missile launched from Cuba against any nation in the Western Hemisphere as an attack by the Soviet Union on the United States, requiring a full retaliatory response upon the Soviet Union. I call upon Chairman Khrushchev to halt and eliminate this clandestine, reckless, and provocative threat to world peace and to stable relations between our two nations.
That clip is from President John F. Kennedy's speech to the world on October 22nd, 1962. That is the moment when the whole world came to a stop because the United States and Soviet Russia stood toe-to-toe and ready to launch a war over a small island in the Caribbean. Hello, my name is William Valor, and my topic is about the Cuban Missile Crisis, a time when the United States and Soviet Russia nearly decided it was time to blow something up. Why? It came out that the Soviets were secretly installing nuclear weapons and troops on the island, and these missiles were all aimed at the U.S. When our government found out, it triggered outrage and then an instant and escalated military response from both sides. If it hadn't been for diplomacy, well, there might not be a world. See, Cuba is a small island country just 90 miles from Florida and the coast of the United States. A man named Castro led a socialist revolution on the island and controlled most of the country. It was Castro's revolution that ended a long friendship between the U.S. and Cuba. Socialism was spreading around the world, mostly in small countries. But Cuba was really close. It was also a protectorate of the Soviet Union. And that's like your worst enemy camping in your backyard. Another part of the problem was that the U.S. tried to overthrow Castro's socialist government with an attempted invasion the year before in 1961. It was called the Bay of Pigs, and it was an epic fail. But Castro expected another invasion from the U.S., and both Cuba and Russia didn't want that to happen. So that's when the Soviet buildup on Cuba began. Okay, so there was a lot of stress between all these people. I've told you a little about Castro, and you probably know who John F. Kennedy was. Remember, he was the president who was later assassinated in Dallas, but you might not know who Nikita Khrushchev was. He was chairman of the Council of Ministers for the Soviet Union and first secretary of the Communist Party. Basically, he was the Soviet bomb deity, and historians are still arguing about why Nikita Khrushchev deployed nuclear missiles into Cuba. It's kind of complicated, but look at world politics like a Texas Hold'em game. Some of the cards are on the table, but you don't know what the other guys are holding. To figure it out, you use a betting strategy. But that depends on your cards. On the table was the fact that China and Cuba were warming up to each other, and it's not like the Russians and Chinese were best friends. Also, the US had missiles in Turkey, which at the time bordered right on the Soviet Union. So, pretty much, Khrushchev wanted a foothold in the West to block Chinese interest in Cuba, to distract the U.S., and to convert more Latin American countries into communism. But all that didn't matter once these photos were taken on October 13, 1962. Kennedy and his advisors couldn't agree on what to do. Every move we made had to be strong, but also we had to be careful not to put the Soviets in a position where they freaked out and pushed the button. The first thought was maybe to bomb the missile sites, but more evidence of a lot more missiles started coming in. Even our military agreed they might not get them all. Still, our military wanted to eliminate the missiles. Over the next few days, militaries on both sides began preparing for war. The U.S. sent its Navy out to stop any more Russian ships from bringing in supplies. Even though several Russian ships were ordered to return home, Khrushchev told one to keep going and to run through the blockade. At the same time, Castro sent all of his troops out to get ready for an American invasion. Basically, everybody was ready to go all in. At the same time, both sides started talking. But here's the tricky part. There are two ways that governments talk to each other. The first way is how they talk publicly. In this case, each side was trying to look strong and in charge. They wanted to look good in front of their own people and their allies. Then there was the real way, and that was called back channels. On October 23rd, Kennedy received this letter from Khrushchev, but unfortunately it's in Russian, so I can't read it to you. but I can't tell you what it says. Khrushchev was concerned about the peace and security of the peoples. You're dismissed. This opened the door to Kennedy and Khrushchev using private letters and messages with trusted couriers so that each could be more direct and, in a weird way, kind of honest. But this is where it got tricky. Kennedy wasn't sure he could trust Khrushchev. After all, Russia lied to Kennedy, telling him there was no missiles in Cuba right after Kennedy knew about them. Khrushchev and Castro didn't trust Kennedy because of the Bay of Pigs. Successful diplomacy means that at some point both sides have to be able to trust each other and to provide evidence to support that trust. On October 24th, the first thing that Kennedy did was widen his blockade to give Khrushchev some more breathing room. In return, Khrushchev stopped his ships dead in the water or called them back to return back to Russia. During all secret negotiations, it was agreed that the U.S. would not invade Cuba and that the Soviets would take all of their missiles out of Cuba and that the United Nations could supervise them. Diplomacy worked because Kennedy and Khrushchev had to trust each other. If they hadn't, this is what would have happened.
Hey baby, jump over here when you do it. I wanna be here, ooby dooby. Ooby dooby. Ooby dooby, ooby dooby. Dooby dooby doo, wah doo, wah doo, wah. Well, you wiggle to the left, you wiggle to the right. Do the ooby dooby with all of your might. Ooby dooby. Ooby dooby. Ooby dooby, ooby dooby.
Hello, my name is William Delore, and my topic is about the Cuban missile. Cards are on the table, but you don't know what the other guys are holding. You try to figure out what the other guys might. Some of the cards are on the table, but you don't know what the other guys are holding. You try to figure out what was the real way, and that was called back channels. On October 23rd, Kennedy got this. Oh my gosh, this is so hard. Okay. Successful diplomacy means Successful diplomacy means that at some point both sides have to be able to trust each other and provide evidence to support that trust.
Cut. Now.
And then I have to get
You have to get out.
Diplomacy worked because Kennedy and Khrushchev had to trust each other. Right?
Yeah, they had to trust each other. Yeah, you might want to get up again. Because the director's cut, he's going to have all these outtakes. Will you get? God, there isn't enough time to run all these outtakes.
Okay, so
6 hours worth of outtakes. Sneeze. Take one.